All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, a lot of times in life, people are not quite sure what they believe in. Oftentimes, they just go along to get along. Certain things sound good, and they jump on board. Oftentimes because they're worried that they're going to be castigated if they don't follow the crowd with whatever's trendy. And with what we saw last NFL regular season, many of these players, I call them woke meatheads, they fell down that rabbit hole. They were trying to force the NFL into being re-engineered with a Marxist paradigm. And there were many aspects of that whole situation that were clearly Hegelian. A lot of it was fostered by a lot of the latent antipathy between the NFL's players, which are predominantly so-called black, and the ownership, which is normally based in the preeminence of quote-unquote conservative blue blood, older Caucasian males. Of course, Donald Trump acted as a fire starter. And I stated that in many of the videos that I made on that issue when he decided that he was going to call out both the NFL owners and the players. And let me say this, that was the best thing that ever happened to the NFL, what Donald Trump did. Because he made the owners make a decision. In life, a king, a leader, has to be able to make tough decisions and not be worried about how those that they're trying to benefit with their decisiveness are going to view that decision. Because oftentimes, people don't even know what's best for them. That's what being a leader is knowing what's best for those that you're ruling over, even better than they know what's best for themselves. And what Donald Trump did was he put the NFL owners in a position where they had to make a decision on that whole NFL anthem issue because it was costing them money. And he basically let the NFL know that if you don't make a decision on this now, I'm going to bring forth tax levies against you and your organization that is going to cost you even more in the long run. I'm also going to bring tax levies against ESPN and many of the NFL's broadcasting outlets. That's why you saw ESPN come against Jemele Hill so hard. And I stated that well before it was apparent what was done. Well, anyway, Donald Trump decided that he was going to try to open up the channels of communication with many of the more quote-unquote woke members of the NFL by inviting them to provide some information on people who may have been incarcerated or who may have been victims of the unfair prison industrial complex and many of the policing practices in the so-called black community. And according to him, he has not heard back from anyone. That's according to him. And I'll say this again. Oftentimes, when we're talking about the propagation of quote-unquote movements, that term movement in and of itself is usually utilized for something that's based in social engineering, some type of Hegelian strategy, or a Marxist movement. All these so-called movements, whether it's the civil rights movement, the homosexual movement, they're all Marxist in nature. And this is why I try to put the so-called black man onto game in regards to this, because they're only going to use the so-called black man as a foot soldier. And once they're able to accomplish whatever their end game is, they're going to cast you by the wayside. They're going to marginalize you again. They're going to throw you in the back. They do not care about you, so-called black man. Point being is this. If you're a person in the NFL who's prominent and has decided that he's going to be an advocate for quote-unquote wokeism, it's going to take a lot more than holding up a right fist in the air or getting down on one knee. You're actually going to have to develop personal relationships, whether it be with the actual victims of this system or with the powers that be, who you're going to have to communicate with in an attempt to alleviate the conditions that you claim you're so concerned about. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Welcome back to TMZ Sports. Evan here with Van and Michael J. Babcock.
What up?
Stop me if you heard this one before. You ready? Donald Trump is mad at the NFL. Mad at the NFL players. He's going after the NFL players. Now remember, Donald Trump made his famous offer to them and said, look, if you guys, you want me to understand and hear where you're coming from, how about this? I want NFL players specifically, I'm inviting you to reach out to me, to talk to me about people who are incarcerated who you want to give a presidential pardon to. I'm going to turn to the players for advice on who to give my next pardon to.
The reason why Donald Trump put forth that decree is because he was putting many of these NFL players on notice. He wants to know exactly how mentally, psychologically, and civically invested they are in many of these platforms that they claim to be about, because he knows that most of them are full of shit. But I want you guys to pay very close attention to the eventual reaction and response of the resident quote-unquote woke liberal black Van Lathan, who's in the middle box on the left. This is going to be normal woke Negro response to any time they're actually called out to be about what they talk about.
Remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. It was something that a lot of people thought he was doing, it was a positive thing. But some people thought it was an olive branch. Some people thought it was an olive branch. Some people thought it was a half man.
Yeah, and he's saying, like, look, that's what they're really protesting about anyway, is what President Trump said, so I'm going to try and listen to them on this. So he was on Fox and Friends this morning, and he was asked
his favorite
it is his favorite show. It was second favorite show. He's been on record saying he likes TMZ too. But anyway, besides the point, he was on Fox and Friends this morning, and he was asked how many NFL players have taken him up on his offer, and this is what Trump said.
You would like to hear some of the stories of people who you should pardon. And you mentioned professional athletes. Have you heard from any of them?
No, I haven't heard. They were all saying, oh, it has nothing to do with the flag. It's the way we've been treated. In the meantime, they're making $15 million a year. Look, I'm all for the athletes. I think it's great. I love athletics. I love sports. But they shouldn't get the politics involved.
I'm shocked you haven't heard from
I don't think I've heard from one. Now, maybe they've called the staff, but I have not personally heard from one.
Look, I'm sure that many of the liberal blacks that frequent my channel are going to be frustrated by this. But yes, I agree with Donald Trump when he states that many of these more prominent athletes should not be mixing politics with their sport, especially due to the fact that 99% of the time, they're woefully unaware of what they're talking about, and they have no real solutions. For the most part, the liberal black believes that if they harass prominent Caucasians enough, that the Caucasian should be willing, ready, and able to solve the so-called black community's problems for them. Why is that? Because once again, in the so-called black community, they look at the average affluent Caucasian as a daddy figure. And unfortunately, so many so-called black men haven't figured out that our people are never going to be respected. The so-called black man is never going to be reckoned or regarded until he views himself as his own problem solver. Like, for example, you hear many brothers state in the so-called black communities like Chicago, Detroit, what have you, that the government drops off guns in the middle of the black community and then leaves, and this is why there's so many guns in the so-called black community. Well, since you know that that is a strategy of the U.S. government to get so-called black men to destroy themselves, that means that it's incumbent upon us to not use those guns to shoot one another. But the real problem is that within the inner framework of the so-called black community, there's no culture. The man is not running the household. The woman is running the household. And wherever the woman is in leadership, there's going to be confusion. And that's the bottom line of it. And beyond that, if many of these prominent woke liberal blacks scattered throughout the sports world are actually as invested as they try to act like they are, it really is incumbent upon them to come up with the solution. It is not incumbent upon prominent Caucasians to come up with a solution that is benefiting them. It's not their job. At the end of the day, the real solution for the so-called black man is, number one, to turn back to the Most High. Number two, for us to discipline ourselves. And number three, to understand that in order for there to be any form of real empowerment, we have to have our own land, our own government, our own army, our own educational system. That is far, far down the road. But in regards to just basic survival in this captivity, the so-called black man must look at himself as the head, number one. And number two, he has to understand which woman he should be inseminating. Those are the two main problems that the so-called black man has. It's not police brutality or anything like that. Are those issues? Absolutely. Is racism an issue? Absolutely. But we can controvert so-called racism if we actually learn how to treat one another better and to prioritize one another. Where does that start? Once again, that starts within the mind of each and every so-called black man first, to get him to love himself. A lot of so-called black men do not love themselves. Look at the boxer Adrian Broner. He does not love himself. That's why he has all these issues. Well, that's one of the reasons why he has all these issues. I also believe that he's suffering from CTE, especially in the aftermath of that first Marcos Maidana fight. But we have to understand that we live in a commercial society. Money is what always talks the most prominently. So when you bring forth many of these strategies, many of these ideas to these affluent Caucasians that you hope you're going to be able to pull at their heartstrings, they want to know what's in it for them. They have to be able to understand that they're going to make money from assisting the so-called black community in many of these plots, these plans, these schemes that are allegedly going to be meant to help so-called black people. These same woke liberal blacks that continue to try to harass affluent Caucasians, when you ask them about the main issues in the so-called black community, that being the huge detachment between the so-called black man and the black woman, the fact that the so-called black man knows nothing about his history, the fact that he has no understanding of the money system, these things go way over their heads. Why is that? Because their main goal is to get a hug from the Caucasian man. That's why I tell you, brothers, that's all this shit is about. Many of these affluent, woke NFL meatheads, they're desperate to get a hug from the president. They just don't have the mental acuity to understand that yet. Ask LeBron James what his overall plan is. He has none. But he's always running his mouth about Donald Trump. I need to hear from people who actually have a plan. I don't care about your emotions. Niggas have been raised to believe that emotionality should be a default mechanism for them whenever they get upset about something. No, it's not, man. That's why the so-called black man is reckoned at the very bottom of the totem pole, because he acts like his damn mother.
Speaking of the staff,
Because I don't know if it's a real issue. I don't think it's a real issue.
And of course, it's a real issue. The way that so-called black men, so-called black people, period, are treated by the police force and are thrown into the prison industrial complex, yes, it is a real issue. But as long as you're unable to lay it out point by point and what you believe the solution should be and how it's going to benefit him in the long run, of course he's going to doubt it. You could have the best business idea in the world, but if you cannot explain to an investor how they're going to make money off of your ideas, they're not going to subsidize you. And that's really all this is about, brothers. The prison industrial complex is an economic process. When you're thrown in prison, you basically become a stock that they want to watch mature, that they invest in. You basically become a new slave labor force. In order for you to be let out of prison, you have to post bond. In other words, you have to be redeemed. There's a monetary transaction. There's a monetary exchange. So the so-called black man has to become hip to game in regards to what's going on here, what's actually going on here. And to be quite frank with you, these players in the NFL that are protesting, and this idiot with the Philadelphia Eagles holding up a sign talking about you're not listening, these are like children tactics.
Wow. So he says he hasn't heard from a single player yet, and he doesn't really think it's an issue because he feels like if it was an issue, somebody would have gotten to him already.
I agree with that. I mean, let's be for real. If there's an emergency situation in your life, you're going to communicate that with an authority who has opened up the channels of communication with you right away. His phone should have been ringing off the hook. We've already heard the story about Kim Kardashian, who was able to have an older black female in Tennessee let out of prison because she communicated with Donald Trump. But when you have these liberal blacks on these sports teams who want to throw tantrums, they don't want to go to the White House because we don't like his presidency, all this bitch-made shit. Who are you helping? You're not helping anyone. That's why I tell you, brothers, all an activist is somebody with a big mouth. There's no substance. There's no depth to what they're talking about.
And got in his face and said, look, here's my list of people who deserve a pardon.
Babcock, I'll let you defend your boy.
Nah, I gotta be honest. I really did think it was an olive branch when he made his initial comments, but hardly any time has passed since he made the...
How much time has to pass? If you're living, breathing, shitting these issues, as soon as you heard about it, you should have been on the phone right away. You're an NFL player. I'm sure that your agent, your representation, could have gotten in contact with him right away. If you're Malcolm Jenkins or whoever it is, Howie Long's son, a lot of these other woke NFL players who claim to be so invested in the improvement of the conditions in the so-called black community, you should have been on the phone with Donald Trump right away. Because what that would have provided you an avenue of is being able to ascertain whether or not he was full of shit. Now, because you didn't get on the phone with him or attempt to, now he can say you're full of shit. That's how that works.
Made those comments, and now to say nobody has taken me up on my offer and I don't think it's a real issue, I think Trump was exposed there. I have to say.
I don't know. All right.
I mean, let's be straight though. If somebody did come to him, Kim Kardashian went to Donald Trump.
Ding.
raved about Kim Kardashian,
Right.
by the way.
Right.
Kim Kardashian was a Trump hater for a long time.
Right, and then she came to him, brought up an injustice in her mind, and Trump examined it and actually freed someone from prison.
Ding. And she's a witch anyway. Look at her in the all black for Saturn worship.
So I do think he would actually listen to an NFL player, but I think it was more a PR thing now. I think that-
No, he would listen to an NFL player. He just wanted to put the onus on them to provide something of substance. So-called black man, we have to be three-dimensional thinkers. It's not enough to emote. You actually have to be able to strategize. If you have a strong belief in something, sit down and write out point by point how you're going to get it accomplished, no matter what it is. If we say we want to change the criminal justice system, if we want to provide prison reform, we have to sit down and understand the system. How does it work? Everything is based in monetary transaction. Everything is commercial in this society. So you have to be able to explain to the president why he should be willing to change this system and how it has affected people unjustly, and actually be able to provide individual circumstances, individual examples, so that he can say, okay, we'll start here, we'll start there. Because you are the ones who are so spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically invested in this society to believe that it's actually going to change. This is modern day Babylon. All America is one of the major departments in the global corporation. That's all it is. That's why every country in the world uses fiat currency, because they're all just outlets for the international bankers based in inner London. That's all it is. Our people don't understand that because they have subscribed to the quote unquote American dream. And this was not created for the so-called black man.
I would love to see somebody like Tory Smith, who I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
I would love to see somebody like Tory Smith call Trump out on his offer and say, you want to talk, let's talk, and go to the Oval Office and spell out a list of things that he thinks are important to him, and we'll see if the president listens. I would love to.
Yes, well, you know what? Tory Smith and anyone else who was to meet with Donald Trump will not just have to provide certain issues that he wants to have attended to. He has to provide specific examples. That's what Trump was asking for. In other words, he's asking the NFL players to do their due diligence, to research what are specific examples where men or women were quote unquote done dirty by the system. Are you willing to do that level of research, or do you just want to get on TV or on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram and talk shit all day? Which is what most liberal blacks love to do. They're really not about anything.
I would love to see that happen.
I know, but that's not what Tory Smith did, though. That's not what Donald Trump asked for.
I know,
Donald
but that's
Trump
what I'd
did-
love to see.
I know, but here's the deal, though. I think that what Donald Trump just said, he completely, first of all, cut the legs off of and undermined everything that the players have been talking about. He said that it wasn't a real issue, so he's saying that they don't really...
The reason why he said it's not a real issue is because they have failed to disprove him. Once you open up the channels of communication and they decide they don't want to talk, remember, he's a businessman. If you're not willing to come to the bargaining table, he doesn't respect you. Once again, the so-called black man does not think like a businessman. The average so-called black man does. Of course, there are a lot of you brothers out there who are astute and know what's going on. But the average so-called black man is raised to think like a woman. That's a fact. And this is why I have this channel, so that hopefully a lot of you younger brothers can controvert that. But we have to look at things more from a three-dimensional perspective and understand how to work things out, establish processes for accomplishing our goals, our missions, whatever they may be, so that it's understandable for those that we're trying to work with. If you're not trying to work with Donald Trump, no problem. Stop talking about it. That's the problem. The so-called black man, the liberal black man, let me specify, talks so much shit that he does not really mean. That's why people do not take you seriously. That's why I don't take so-called pro-blacks and liberal blacks seriously, because I know they're full of shit. And Donald Trump knows they're full of shit too. And he's full of shit his damn self on a lot of issues. But when you don't communicate with him, you cannot reveal that.
don't really even mean it. And the reason why he's saying that they don't really mean it is because they didn't act in the way that he wanted them to act. That's very telling. The reality is that this was never about getting people out of jail. It was about systemic and cyclical issues that are happening in American society.
Because
Well, the real systemic and cyclical issues that are happening in American society is the so-called black man wanting to worship the Caucasian man and wanting to worship the so-called black woman. Those are the main cyclical issues that so-called black men need to address. But once again, this is why I always state on this channel, that I don't abide by the paradigm of circular race talk or the circular gender war. Liberal blacks love that circular conversation. They love that circular argument because people do not like to have their feet held to the fire to where they're told, they're made to understand this is what I need to do to change my life. They always want to point the finger and blame somebody else for their condition, for their situation. And are we as so-called black men at a disadvantageous situation or condition in this society? Absolutely. But we cannot expect anyone else to solve our problems. We have to solve our own problems.
You're right. I agree with you. But that being said, if Trump is saying I will open my door and give somebody, an opportunity to talk to me if they present an argument for a presidential pardon, if Tory Smith comes with a couple
but that's
of names,
not what he said, though.
I know.
What he said, we have to, words matter. What he said was very specific. What he said was, if there's anyone you think that should be let out of jail,
right.
He didn't say, I'm down to have a discussion about.
No, I know that.
Well, what do you think he's really saying, Van Lathan? He stated that nobody called him. So clearly he was down to have a discussion if he stated that his phone line is open. Once again, most of these liberal blacks, they don't really want any solutions. They really don't. They just want to see how much chaos and discord they can propagate in this society, which is a reflection of the so-called black community, which is filled with chaos and discord.
I know that, but what I'm saying is if somebody comes with that list and they satisfy that part of the challenge from Trump, I guess, and they say, yeah, I do have an argument for some people who should be released from prison, and here's why, and it opens the conversation to a larger issue.
Right.
I think
at least for the first time he wasn't being defiant, and maybe he doesn't fully understand the issues, but at least it did show an opening that he'd be willing to talk.
But he made me right. What he just said, that we asked him, and he said no, and then he says, well, that also shows that they don't really care.
But what if he doesn't fully understand?
Of course it shows that they don't really care. If somebody tells you, look, I want to work for you, I want a job in your company, and you tell them, okay, no problem, be here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and they don't show up, what does that tell you? That tells you they weren't really serious. If Donald Trump states, you know what, you guys claim to have a grievance, an issue against the American system, the criminal justice system, or the prison industrial complex, or what have you, my phone line is open, and nobody calls him for a week. What is that really saying? How should that resonate with him as a businessman? Business people are about communication. You have to be able to communicate your thoughts, your wants, your demands, or what have you. Now, he just sat down with Kim Jong-un. Now, we know that a lot of that was really just for show, that all Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un are basically just managers or directors in the overall global corporation. They pretty much get told what to do. But still, they came out of their pseudo meeting or whatever that was, talking about how they respected one another. Now, how contrived or legitimate or sincere that was, we'll never really know. Point being is this: you have to put the onus on Donald Trump by attempting to communicate with him. With this mentality that, well, we're just going to go 4 years or 8 years and not talk to the president. We're going to stay in our room and watch TV and pout. That shit is not going to help anybody.
Understand what's going on, but he was open to talking. And what if somebody like Tory Smith does go to the White House and then shows him the light?
If he doesn't understand that what he could have said a month ago, a year ago, whenever ago, was, you know what, I don't fully understand these issues. Come here.
We didn't have it in the clip.
Now listen to what Van Lathan just stated. He said what Donald Trump could have said a month ago is, I don't fully understand these issues. Come here and we'll talk. Why would he say that when he's already said that? He's already invited many of these sports teams to the White House. They have stated that they're not going to come because they don't agree with his politics.
In the clip that we showed, but Trump went on to say, I'm all for athletes being involved in politics. Just don't bring it on the field. Run for office. Affect change that way.
Well, I mean, that's his...
You don't even have to run for office to affect change. When you start to understand the power of culture, then a lot of those affluent athletes, if they're truly sincere, they can invest their funds in a lot of these goals or a lot of these purposes or whatever it is that they claim to believe in to try to help out their quote-unquote community. The real problem is that our people don't have a culture. So we constantly have to look to affluent Caucasians to help us out, to guide us.
That's his opinion. The fact of the matter is that this is America, and you don't have to wait.
And that gets back to the NFL, and that's the opinion of a lot of people.
I get it, but you don't have to wait until it's okay or palatable to someone else for you to speak your heart. If that were the case, Babcock, there would be no America. Understand that if people waited until it was appropriate to speak and never bucked the system, the country wouldn't exist.
No, I understand.
No, sir, not quite. The reason why America exists is because a certain amount of rabble was raised in order to cause a revolt due to the fact that the Bank of England was attempting to control America monetarily. I've already gone over the real reasons for the American Revolution.
I understand that. While at work.
No, it doesn't matter where you are. I'm talking about if there's an
injustice. It does matter when you're at work.
No, it doesn't.
It does, though, man.
It's America. The
because
spirit
when
of
you're
the
at
country.
work.
Now listen to Van Lathan. This is the real problem with the liberal black right here. They love America. They love the ideals, the purported ideals of America, more than they actually believe in their own alleged causes. Liberal blacks and pro-blacks do not believe in their own causes as much as they do the purported ideals of America. That's why they constantly frustrate themselves, because they're hoping once again that one day they can guilt trip Big Daddy, the Caucasian man, into saying, son, get up off your knees, I love you. That's all this is really about.
The spirit of the country is advanced citizenry. It's advanced citizenry right here. Like we're doing it on a different level. That means wherever you are, wherever your microphone is biggest, you go out there, you talk about injustice, and hopefully we can come together and then change it.
Now, how could you come together with anyone when you don't want to communicate with the people that you claim you want to come together with? Liberal blacks do not want to speak with anyone. They want to speak at people. That's why you're so confrontational with a lot of your verbiage that has no depth. Everything is just on surface level. There's no real substance.
You don't wait till it's appropriate to the people that are impressing you. You just talk. Can I?
No, Van Lathan. No, you don't just talk. That mentality is what you got from your mother. No disrespect to you, bro. In reality, when you're trying to confer with someone and you're trying to build a bridge with them, or you're trying to accomplish a goal or a mission, you have to bring something to the table that that other person can say, okay, I'll take this for that. This was called quid pro quo. It's one of the basics of conferring, of trying to build. You can't just tell someone who's in an affluent position of power that you claim you want to help you that, no, we're not going to go to the White House. We don't want to talk to you. We don't agree with your politics, but you're not helping us enough. No, sir, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. The so-called black man is going to have to ascend up and beyond that level of a high schooler that has been placed upon him, to be quite frank with you, by his environment where he's been raised mostly by his mother. That's where that mentality of just talk comes from. No, you don't just talk. There's a time and a place and a certain type of way that you express yourself in order to accomplish your goals.
Can I invite Torrey Smith to come on the show? Torrey Smith, I'd love to have you on the show. Please come on the show.
Yeah, bring him on the show.
But anyway, that's it on that issue regarding Mr. Donald Trump and his statements about the NFL players not communicating with him. I'm not surprised at all, because most of these brothers, they don't really know what the hell they believe. They don't know what they're talking about. They really just charged up and have had a battery put in their back by social media. So peace.